It's Tuesday, the 7th of May, and the time is 8:13 a.m. My name is Dingane Lutuli, and I'm feeling much better. Relatively speaking. The clenching feeling is gone. Entirely. Apparently, a few water spirits and an ash snake were enough to do the trick. Although, maybe that's just my instinct to think about it in terms of mathematics, trying to quantify the spiritual and the magical. Whatever the case, I'm just happy I don't have to confirm what was waiting at the end of that road. So I should be fine to just stay here and keep studying the box. Except I don't have to go after the witch, Bongi, again. But I need to. I need to know for certain what happened to my father, and if she really did kill him. I need to make things right. I don't know if that's something I can do, but if I don't, I don't know, it would feel like I'm failing him somehow. This is an entry he made in his diary a few years ago. From the date, I know this was while we were back in Durban during the week of Easter. 10th of April, 2021. I didn't expect a sighting so far away from home. I suppose I've become accustomed to the dark gifts being far more common in the Western Cape, that I forget the dangers of my homeland are nothing to scoff at. There's a reason this burden found our clan after all. It's merely that the dark holds tighter there, in the rural parts so many were pushed out to, away from towns and cities built by foreign hands. There are often enough Izangoma and Izinyanga to combat dark acts and influence. But for where they are absent, I'm fortunate that I don't venture far without my tools. We were on holiday for Easter. Constance was the one to suggest it, as the stress from work has apparently turned me into an unspeaking nightmare. The kids have also been restless after being stuck at home for the better part of a year. So, we thought it would do us some good to have a week away. The drive up was a test of all of our patience, but I figured it was safer than putting us all on a plane. Even the location we chose was off the beaten path, so we would be in contact with as few people as possible during that time. In many ways, I was being very responsible. And in one way, without realizing, I was asking for trouble. After a morning with family Constance hadn't seen in some time, we arrived at our destination in the afternoon on Good Friday. We'd found a modestly priced cottage in Umzindo, and the kids had promised they would be good about sharing rooms. It was part of a small town, but it was somewhat remote, with open fields on 3 sides enclosed by a gravel road, and a stretch of hardy trees on the 4th side. It reminded me of my youth, a month or 2 out of each year spent visiting my father and his family, wasting time in the dust and heat with the neighbors' children. His home was actually just over an hour from where we were staying, and that Saturday, I took some time to visit his grave. The matter of weather is usually a concern while traveling, especially with our luck. But that weekend it had been fairly pleasant for us. We were staying until the following Friday, though, and on Tuesday there came a storm. We kept indoors for the morning and waited for it to clear up, as it was meant to, but it continued to rain throughout the day. It wasn't much more than an inconvenience at first. I've never really understood how to interpret a rain forecast anyways, and maybe even the educated guess of professionals was off by a few hours. But as the day passed, the rain only fell harder, its pelting against the roof and windows like the swarming of a hive. Even the thunder and lightning, which had been only a brief interlude earlier, returned in greater force. Still, I was hesitant to assume it was anything outside of the natural, especially in the season where it rained to the point of flooding every few years. Then, as the sun sank lower and night began to claim the land inch by inch, the lightning began to strike closer. More frequently, too, spear after spear of crackling light splitting the air. When it finally hit our cottage and a window shattered, I finally accepted it. I cautioned my family to stay together in one room, away from the windows, took up my tools, and went out into the storm. As I moved through the pouring rain, my path lit by the flashes of brightness, I ran through my knowledge about witches of the baleful storm. They're a bit of a one-trick pony, in my experience, but it's a very useful trick. Manipulating weather much like this, often throwing storms at the targets of their ire. This witch had to be especially powerful, because it was clear this wasn't random malice. This was a targeted attack, which meant they were able to sense my presence from afar. Fortunately, I had just stocked up on power before I left Cape Town, a force of habit over my years of work. And hands are much better at sensing witches than the other way around. I went in the direction the storm had come from, kicking through tall, soaked grasses as I moved amidst the trees. With a great deal of focus, I was able to sense dark energy nearby and find the witch's hut. A brick structure out in the thickets, small and lopsided. It was well proofed, though, seeing as the inside looked perfectly dry when I kicked the door open. There wasn't much inside. An old mattress with a thick blanket thrown off. A gnarled cane leaning against the wall next to a worn leather satchel. And a mass of half-used candles standing on their own melted wax, a few scattering the barest light in the dark. At the head of the room, in the seat of power, was a lanky man folded into a cross-legged form, eyes lifting from a pot of water that sat amidst symbols in white chalk. My blade was already out when I spotted the man, and I ran full bore at him. He didn't look particularly strong, so my best bet was to move fast and overpower him. He had a fair reaction time, though, and quickly clapped his hands together. A deep, reverberating boom escaped his grasp, so loud and so sudden that it stunned me still. The pain in my ears was surpassed only by the inescapable ringing, and I had to fight to reorient myself. I managed enough awareness that I saw the witch attempt to run past me in my stupor. Clumsily, I reached out with my free hand and shoved him, knocking him to the ground just as I fell over myself. There was no rhyme or skill to what followed, only a mad scramble of swinging limbs to gain some sense of leverage. I could barely get my mind to focus beyond the act of putting blade to flesh. I had to strike 3 times before I actually got to the man's heart. When I spoke the final words over him, I could only hope I was saying them out loud, as I still couldn't hear over that ringing. When I left the hut, hauling the witch's body out into the thicket, the thunder had quieted, and the rain had slowed to a drizzle. The one fortune, I suppose, was that the earth was soft enough to dig a grave with only my blade and my bare hands. The hut and its contents had to wait until morning, when I was clear enough to break them. It wasn't my most impressive day, and it's not in my nature to run headlong towards the dark. But sometimes, the situation calls for direct action. Sure, I was taught to never take the work personally, And that works just fine when I'm the only one at risk. When the threat is harm to my family, I do not let it stand. I remember this day well. It was a very bad day on the tail end of a few really good ones. That storm shook all of us so badly that we left Durban earlier than we'd planned. I remember my father leaving after that window broke. He said something about moving the car, which we all thought was insane, but he instructed us all to stay put and disappeared. I tried to assure them that a car was one of the safer places to be in a storm, but I think I went into too much detail about Faraday cages and lost them. Then the storm subsided, and I went out to look for my father because it had been an hour by then, and I found him stumbling back to the cottage, covered in mud. He could barely hear me. Said the lightning had struck very close to him and knocked him over. At the time, that was about the most extraordinary thing I could have imagined happening. And meanwhile, I was paging through my father's diary for, I don't know, guidance, expertise, and I landed on this one. Guess I was trying to figure out if he took as easily to this role as my grandfather did. More easily than I am, certainly. The way they talk about witches, it's like they're not even human anymore. But even if that's true, doesn't that still mean they were human once? There's at least confirmation here that Hand is a title, the name of the role I've taken over. But this entry also made me think of something. The way my father and grandfather use grave dirt to fight against the darkness, the making of the vow taking place in a burial plot. It's honestly embarrassing that I didn't put it together before, but my Zulu escapes me at the best of times. Ukfihla means the hiding of something, but it can also mean the burying of something. So, wena uvusa ukufihliwe, you who wakes what is buried. The being that we're tied to has to do with death somehow. Which then made me think of the story I read just after all this started, about the woman who used witchcraft to bring her son back from the dead. Do the hands draw from the same power as the witches do? Some kind of fighting fire with fire thing? And if that's true, why don't we go the same way they do? Losing our humanity and becoming corrupted by this energy. It always feels like every answer comes with even more questions, which is endlessly frustrating. But I don't have the time to puzzle it all out right now. It'll still be here when I get back. Or if I get back, I guess. Call to the Dark, created by Sandile Dlamini. Featuring Dingane, voiced by Sandile Dlamini. To keep up with the show, visit @CallDarkPod on social media or email calldarkpod@gmail.com.